If you've ever wondered what truly matters as you navigate your golden years, this story will touch your soul. A retired professor from Chicago shared some profound insights that have been moving older adults to tears across the country. These aren't just empty platitudes or generic advice, but hard-earned wisdom from someone who spent 43 years in classrooms, watching countless students grow and change. Professor Margaret Thompson, now 78, recently spoke at a community center in Denver, Colorado, and her words resonated so deeply that many attendees were visibly moved. What she shared wasn't complicated or revolutionary, but it was profoundly true. Sometimes the most powerful truths are the simplest ones, and Professor Thompson's advice cuts straight to the heart of what it means to age gracefully and purposefully. Her perspective comes not just from her professional experience as an educator, but from her personal journey through retirement, loss, and the inevitable changes that come with growing older. If you're ready to hear some gentle but powerful truths about making the most of your later years, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Let's explore together what this wise educator learned about living fully, even when life feels like it's winding down. The foundation of meaningful aging starts with accepting where you are right now. Professor Thompson began her talk with a simple but profound observation that immediately caught everyone's attention. She said, "The biggest mistake I see older adults make is spending too much time looking backward with regret or forward with anxiety. Instead of being present in the beautiful moment they have right now, this isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything is perfect. Margaret knows firsthand about loss and disappointment. She lost her husband of 51 years, Robert, just 3 years ago to Alzheimer's disease. She watched her beloved partner slowly fade away, experiencing the heartbreak that so many of our generation knows intimately. She also faced her own health scares, including a cancer diagnosis at 74 that required months of treatment. But here's what she discovered through these challenges. Dwelling on what was lost or worrying about what might come next robbed her of the genuine joy and purpose available in her present circumstances. She learned to find peace in small moments, like watching her grandson Samuel learn to ride a bicycle in their neighborhood park in Lincoln, Nebraska, or enjoying a quiet cup of coffee while reading a good book on her porch. Margaret emphasized that accepting your current reality doesn't mean giving up or settling for less. Instead, it means working with what you have rather than fighting against what you cannot change. She spoke about friends who had spent years bitter about their physical limitations, their financial situations, or family relationships that didn't turn out as expected. That bitterness, she observed, became a prison that prevented them from experiencing the genuine contentment and purpose that was still possible. The professor shared how she had to learn this lesson herself. After retirement, she initially felt lost and purposeless. She had defined herself by her career for so long that without it, she didn't know who she was. She spent months feeling sorry for herself, comparing her active professional life to her quieter retirement years. It wasn't until she started volunteering at a local literacy program that she realized her value and purpose hadn't disappeared. They had simply evolved. This acceptance doesn't happen overnight. Margaret acknowledged that it's a daily choice, sometimes an hourly choice, to focus on what you can control and find gratitude for what you have. She encouraged her audience to practice what she calls present moment awareness, taking time each day to notice something beautiful, something that brings joy, or something to be thankful for. The second pillar of fulfilling aging involves nurturing relationships that truly matter. One of the most moving parts of Professor Thompson's presentation focused on the critical importance of relationships in our later years. She shared research showing that social isolation among older adults has become epidemic, with devastating effects on both mental and physical health. But beyond the statistics, she spoke from the heart about her own experience and observations. After Robert's passing, Margaret found herself increasingly isolated. Many of their couple friends gradually stopped, including her in social activities. She understood this wasn't intentional cruelty, but it still hurt deeply. She realized she needed to be intentional about building and maintaining connections, something she had taken for granted when her husband was alive to share that responsibility. Margaret's advice was both practical and profound. Focus your limited energy on relationships that are genuinely mutual and life-giving. She talked about learning to distinguish between people who only contacted her when they needed something versus those who genuinely cared about her well-being. This wasn't about becoming cynical or cutting people off, but about being wise with her emotional investment. She shared the story of her friendship with Dorothy Williams, a widow she met at the local library. Dorothy was 81 and had recently moved to Denver to be closer to her daughter. Both women were dealing with loneliness and the challenges of starting over in their later years. Their friendship began with simple conversations over coffee and gradually deepened into a supportive relationship that has enriched both their lives immeasurably. Margaret emphasized the importance of being the kind of friend you want to have. She spoke about making the effort to check on people, remembering important dates, and showing up during difficult times. She also talked about the courage required to be vulnerable and authentic in relationships, especially when you've experienced significant losses. One particularly touching story involved her relationship with her adult children. Margaret admitted that she had to learn to let go of certain expectations about how often they would visit or call. Her son David lives in Seattle with his busy medical practice, and her daughter Jennifer is raising 3 teenagers in Phoenix. Initially, Margaret felt hurt and neglected by their limited contact, but she realized that constantly expressing disappointment was actually pushing them away. Instead, she chose to focus on the quality of their interactions rather than the frequency. She learned to initiate positive conversations, share encouragement about their challenges, and express genuine interest in their lives without making them feel guilty about their busy schedules. This shift transformed her relationships with both children and actually resulted in more meaningful contact. Margaret also spoke about the importance of intergenerational relationships. She mentioned her involvement in a program that pairs seniors with college students for weekly conversations. Her partnership with a 20-year-old nursing student named Ashley has been mutually beneficial, providing Margaret with fresh perspectives and giving Ashley wisdom and encouragement as she navigates her studies and early career decisions. If you found these insights helpful so far, please take a moment to share this video with someone who might benefit from hearing Professor Thompson's wisdom. Sometimes we all need a reminder about what truly matters in life. The third essential element involves finding purpose and meaning beyond traditional career success. Professor Thompson spent considerable time discussing what might be the most challenging aspect of aging for many accomplished individuals: redefining success and purpose when traditional markers no longer apply. Having spent 43 years as a respected educator, she understood the identity crisis that often accompanies retirement. She shared her own struggle with this transition. For decades, her sense of worth had been tied to her students' achievements, her research publications, and her reputation within academia. When she retired, she felt like she had lost not just her job, but her entire sense of identity and contribution to the world. The breakthrough came when Margaret realized that her decades of experience hadn't become worthless just because she was no longer earning a paycheck from them. She had developed wisdom, patience, and teaching skills that could serve others in different contexts. The key was finding new venues for these contributions. Margaret began volunteering at a community center, helping adults improve their reading skills. She discovered that teaching a 65-year-old man named Frank to read better so he could help his grandson with homework was every bit as meaningful as any lecture she had given to graduate students. The difference was that she was now serving from a place of choice and passion rather than professional obligation. She also spoke about friends who had found different paths to purpose. Her neighbor, retired mechanic William Jackson, started mentoring young men in automotive skills at a local vocational center. Another friend, former nurse Patricia Davis, began visiting homebound seniors, providing companionship and basic health monitoring. Each had found ways to use their skills and experience in service of others. Margaret emphasized that purpose in later years doesn't require grand gestures or major commitments. Sometimes it's as simple as being consistently available to listen when someone needs to talk, or sharing your knowledge of gardening with neighbors, or writing letters to family members, sharing family history and wisdom. She also talked about the importance of creative pursuits and personal growth. At 75, she took up watercolor painting, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for during her teaching career. She's not particularly talented, she admitted with a laugh, but the process of creating brings her joy and helps her see beauty in everyday scenes she might otherwise overlook. Margaret stressed that finding purpose isn't about proving your worth to others or trying to recapture past glory. It's about discovering what brings you alive and finding ways to share that aliveness with the world around you. For some, this might be grandparenting with intentionality. For others, it might be preserving family stories or community history. The specific activity matters less than the spirit of contribution and growth behind it. The fourth cornerstone focuses on maintaining hope while acknowledging life's inevitable challenges. Perhaps the most profound part of Professor Thompson's presentation dealt with something many older adults struggle with, but rarely discuss openly: how to maintain hope and optimism while facing the realities of aging, loss, and mortality. Margaret spoke candidly about what she called the season of lass, the last time she danced with her husband, the last Christmas with her elderly mother, the last day she felt truly physically strong. She acknowledged that this awareness of endings can cast a shadow over even happy moments, creating a bittersweet quality to life that younger people rarely understand. But rather than allowing this awareness to lead to despair, Margaret learned to let it deepen her appreciation for what remains. She quoted a poem by Mary Oliver that she keeps on her refrigerator. "Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last? And too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Margaret shared how she learned to hold both grief and gratitude simultaneously. She can miss Robert terribly while also feeling grateful for their 51 years together. She can acknowledge her physical limitations while appreciating the activities she can still enjoy. This isn't about forced optimism or denying difficult emotions, but about developing what she calls mature hope. Mature hope, according to Margaret, is different from the naive optimism of youth. It's hope that has been tested by real loss and disappointment, but has chosen to persist anyway. It's hope that doesn't require perfect circumstances to flourish. It's hope that can coexist with sadness, uncertainty, and even fear. She told the story of her friend Harold, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at 72. Initially, Harold became deeply depressed, focusing entirely on what the disease would take away from him. But with support from family and counseling, he learned to focus on what he could still control and enjoy. He started a support group for others with Parkinson's, began writing his memoirs, and made sure to tell his children and grandchildren how much he loved them while he could still speak clearly. Harold's approach became a model for Margaret's own handling of life's challenges when she was diagnosed with cancer. She chose to focus on the quality of her treatment options rather than dwelling on the uncertainty of outcomes. She used the experience to deepen relationships with people who mattered to her and to eliminate activities and commitments that weren't truly important. Margaret emphasized that maintaining hope doesn't require religious faith, though that can certainly provide comfort for those who have it. For her, hope is grounded in the conviction that life has meaning and beauty even in the midst of difficulty, and that we can choose how we respond to circumstances we cannot control. She also spoke about the importance of legacy thinking, not in terms of grand accomplishments, but in terms of the positive impact we have on individual lives. Every encouraging word, every act of kindness, every moment of genuine presence with another person creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see or imagine. Before we continue with Professor Thompson's final insights, please take a moment to leave a comment below sharing one thing you're grateful for in your life right now. Sometimes expressing gratitude helps us shift our focus to what's working rather than what's missing. The final element involves embracing the unique gifts that come with age and experience. Professor Thompson concluded her presentation with perhaps her most countercultural message, that aging isn't just about loss and limitation, but also about gaining qualities and perspectives that are only possible through lived experience. She challenged the youth-obsessed culture's narrative that older adults are irrelevant or burdensome. Instead, she argued that people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond possess what she calls wisdom capital that cannot be acquired any other way. This includes perspective that comes from having weathered multiple life storms, patience that develops through decades of experience, and freedom that comes from caring less about others' opinions and more about authentic living. Margaret shared how this perspective had changed her own life. In her 70s, she felt more comfortable saying no to activities that didn't align with her values or energy levels. She stopped trying to please everyone and started being more honest about her needs and opinions. This wasn't about becoming selfish or difficult, but about living with greater authenticity and intentionality. She talked about the freedom that comes from having already made most of life's major decisions, career paths, marriage, child rearing, and many other consuming concerns were behind her. This created space for different kinds of exploration and growth. She could take art classes without worrying about career advancement. She could travel to places that interested her without considering career networking opportunities. She could spend time with people simply because she enjoyed their company. Margaret also discussed what researchers call socio-emotional selectivity, the natural tendency of older adults to prioritize emotionally meaningful experiences and relationships over novel or purely informational ones. She presented this not as a limitation, but as wisdom, the ability to focus energy on what truly matters rather than scattering it across countless distractions. She shared examples of older adults who had used their life experience to make unique contributions. Her friend Catherine, a retired social worker, became a court-appointed advocate for seniors facing financial abuse, using her professional knowledge and personal experience to protect vulnerable adults. Another friend, former businessman Thomas Anderson, started teaching financial literacy to young adults, helping them avoid the money mistakes he had made earlier in his career. Margaret emphasized that embracing the gifts of age doesn't mean romanticizing the challenges or pretending that physical and cognitive changes aren't real. Instead, it means recognizing that every stage of life has both limitations and opportunities, and choosing to focus energy on maximizing the opportunities rather than lamenting the limitations. She concluded this section with a powerful observation. I have more peace now at 78 than I had at 38, even though my circumstances are in many ways more challenging. That's not despite my age. It's because of it. I've learned what matters and what doesn't, what I can control and what I can't, what brings joy and what brings misery. That's not something I could have learned from a book or a lecture. It only comes from living. Margaret's presentation ended with a standing ovation and many tears, but also with something more valuable. A room full of people who felt seen, understood, and hopeful about their own aging journey. Living fully in our later years isn't about denying the challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about approaching each day with the hard-earned wisdom that comes from decades of experience, the deep relationships that sustain us through difficult times, and the quiet confidence that our lives have mattered and continue to matter. Professor Thompson's insights remind us that aging isn't just about what we're losing, but also about what we're gaining: perspective, freedom, authenticity, and the precious gift of knowing what truly matters. If these words have touched your heart today, please subscribe to our channel and share this message with others who might benefit from Professor Thompson's wisdom. Sometimes we all need a reminder that our best chapters might still be ahead of us, and that growing older can be a journey of continued growth, purpose, and joy. What matters most isn't how many years we have left, but how fully we choose to live the years we've been given.